Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where our guest today is Robert Dugoni. I am a longtime fan of his work. Today we're going to be talking about The Last Agent, but I was a fan back in 2006 when The Jurymaster came out. Absolutely loved this book, New York Times bestseller, and I've been following him since. Read so many of the books in the different series that he's done, and also with standalones, Extraordinary Life with Sam Hill is one of my book reporter bets-ons. So this is a book that readers are talking about all the time. I just love that the colors are kind of coordinating. We've got this red thing going on today. I absolutely love it. The book that came out before The Last Agent, which I also have, is The Eighth Sister. So if you can't figure out now, I'm a huge fan of his work. So I'm so excited to have him here with me today, where we're going to be speaking about The Last Agent and also trying to catch up on his career because he has a lot going on. So welcome, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. You know, it's too bad we can't get together in person. I can remember sitting through many Thriller Fest things, and you were knitting.
That's right. Yeah. And I'd be sitting there knitting, and we'd be sitting, and then you're sitting there next to me, like joking around with what I was doing. It was really funny. And we used to tell great jokes sitting in the back of the room, and all these kinds of things that just don't happen, you know, getting together. I also remember meeting up with you at a coffee shop in Seattle, somewhere along the way when you were thinking about career direction. And I still remember where we were sitting and talking there. So just a very, very long time, everybody, besides a professional relationship, a wonderful friendship as well, with someone I very, very much admire. So The Last Agent is the second book in the Charles Jenkins series. And it's really, you can read it without reading the first book. You can really, you know, dive right into this. So let's talk about why the series and The Last Agent. Tell us a little bit about them.
So, you know, years ago, I was talking to Kristen Hanna, who's the author of The Nightingale. She was represented by Meg Ruley, the same agent I'm represented by. And she wrote this beautiful, incredible novel that was kind of unlike her prior novels. My wife was a big fan, and she said, this book is completely different. And I read it. It's a phenomenal book. And so I asked her, I said, you know, how did you come up with this story? And she said to me, you know, Bob, sometimes great stories fall in our laps, and we just have to get out of their way. And that's really what happened to me here. I wrote, as you said, The Jurymaster, and I included Charles Jenkins living on Camino Island, and people really liked him. And so he became David Sloan's private investigator in my legal thriller series. And I was sitting at home one day, and I got an email from a gentleman who had said he read The Jurymaster, which, you know, was crazy because the book at that time was probably about 15 years old. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And he said, I'd really love to talk to you about one of the characters. Well, you know, we don't do that very often because you just never know. And then 2 days later, he said, I just read Wrongful Death and the third book in the series, Bodily Harm. And God, this is really phenomenal. He's very complimentary. I'd love to talk to you. So I looked him up, and you know, he was a very legitimate man. He owned a business here in close to my hometown, and you know, completely legitimate. And I finally made it. I would have coffee with him at a Starbucks, right? Totally harmless situation, right? And just before I left that day, I decided, well, I'm going to check my Google one more time just to make sure he's not like a serial killer or something, you know. And so I checked, and on about the 8th page down on Google, which I was just looking, there was a gentleman that had a similar name, not the same name, but a similar name, who had been acquitted of espionage. And he was the first intelligence officer acquitted of espionage in the United States. Okay, well, that's interesting, but it's not the same name. So I went to the Starbucks, and he was sitting out front with a copy of The Jurymaster, just like you. And we introduced ourselves, and I said, are you aware that there's a guy with a very similar name? And he said, that was me.
Wow.
So we sat down and we talked, and I said to him when he was done, I said, you know, it's a fascinating story, but it's really not very sexy right now. The country that he was accused of the problems in was not in the news. You know, there was nothing sexy about it. But I said, you know what's sexy right now is Russia and Putin. And I said, I don't want to write your story, but I think I would like to bring Charles Jenkins back. He said, oh, I don't want you to write my story. But anything I can do to help, let me know. And I said, well, yeah, there is something you can help. You can help me with the espionage. So I wrote The Eighth Sister, and I came up with this idea. And along the way, I met two former CIA officers, and you know, just kind of fortuitously. and they agreed to help me. Not really get into the too much of it, but they would agree to at least look at it and it makes sense, and at least what happened and that would happen. So I wrote The Eighth Sister, and it's a book about a guy that is completely wronged. Charles Jenkins he gets to Russia and he realizes everything he's been told is a lie, and he's been duped, and he's running for his life. And he makes it back home, and he's tried for espionage so that he'll keep his mouth shut. And he decides, I'm not going to do that. He fights it and he wins. And in any event, he's at home and he's done with everything. But he's not. He's a guy he's a very competent, qualified guy, and this is what he does. And his wife begins to sense this a little bit. And sure enough, he's at home and he's in his garden, and a young man shows up. And the young man is from the CIA, and Jenkins is about to kill him. But the young man says to him, we're looking for an agent that we've lost. And he says, what's the name? And he says, Paulina Ponomayova. And Paulina is the woman who saved Jenkins's life in The Eighth Sister. So he feels compelled to go back to Moscow and find out if she's alive, if she's being held in Lefortovo prison, and if so, can he get her out of the country? And the fun part, Carol, was it's just a chase book. It's just
completely is.
And I could call on all my friends that are bush pilots and snowmobile riders, all these who do far more interesting things than sit at their desk and type. They really were. It was a lot of fun to write because they were really into it.
It is complete chase. There are parts where I was thinking of the Thomas Crown Affair when they're all switching in the train station. Yeah. I could just hear the music coming up below them. And then there are parts where they're just taking off and you're having fun as the reader because you know where they are, but you don't, because all of a sudden they said there are 3 cars, they're all going in 3 different directions. Which one is it? And it's just, I don't know, it's just that the ultimate chase, and the chase just happens from section to section to section. Let's go back for a moment because he is deciding that he's going to go back to Russia. He is like kind of out of the life. He's not doing this at all. And I love the part where he's out describing to his wife why he's going to do this, what he's going to do. It reminded me years ago, I knew a guy from the FBI named Christopher Whitcomb. And he was telling me how he used to go to the softball game and he might walk off the field and have to leave like right at that moment. His car was always packed. He was always ready to go. And he said, you'd be on the field and you'd wave goodbye and you don't know if you're gone for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or anything like that. And I was thinking of that very much as I was reading this, because you don't know if he's going to come back. His son is worried about him. His wife is worried about him. And I love that they were talking outside, like away from the children on the swing set, but it was so real because I remember Chris describing that to me. And he says, and you're just going to go and you're going to lay in some field with a sniper, gun, waiting for something to happen. And it could be weeks. Yeah. And I think this was so realistic about the way it hits the family at the same time, because he's this family guy that's set up at the beginning.
Yeah. 2 things. One is I got some really fabulous reviews that are going to go up, be posted on Amazon. And they talk about that, Jenkins, unlike other espionage protagonists, is very real, and people can really identify with him because of the things that you just mentioned. And I always remember when I was a young kid, I punched a window. My sisters were bullying me, and I punched a window, and I got this big scar. And my mother wasn't home, and my sisters weren't old enough to drive, and so they ran down the street screaming for help. And this man named Mr. Pete drove up in an old-fashioned Porsche. And I sat in the back and he drove me to the hospital. And Mr. Pete was this man that lived at the end of the block with his wife. And she was a really nice lady. And we would go down the house to see them. And of course, after it all happened, I'd go down. And there would always be a bag packed at the front door. And I remember on several occasions saying, are you going on a trip? Oh, well, we don't know. Sometime Mr. Pete gets called away for business. And, he has to go. Oh, well, where's he going? Well, we don't know. Well, how long is he going to be gone? Well, we don't know. I was just a kid asking kid questions. And I'm like 95% certain that Mr. Pete probably was a CIA officer. Mm-hmm. And he's exactly the type of CIA officer as the people that I've met, which is what makes Charles Jenkins a bit different. The CIA officers that I met were very nondescript. You'd never remember them. they could go to a restaurant 10 times and no one would identify them. Charlie's biggest problem is he's a 6'5" African-American man. And there's, I think the number of Black people in the Soviet Union is something less than 4%. So he's going to stand out. He's going to, and that's what makes his mission so difficult, is especially in The Last Agent, where he's going in there and he has to identify himself in order to get sufficient information to go after Viktor Fedorov. He's going to be identifiable, and he's going to be on the run immediately.
And I also love that they told him to grow a beard so he could look Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
They said, do that because you're going to be so like stand out. So why don't you grow a beard? We'll try and pull you off as being Middle Eastern. And I like love that because it's like, oh, really? That's what's going to work?
Yeah.
Is your light skin enough? Maybe we can do this. What made you decide to have your character be African-American? Where was that coming from?
Charles Jenkins is my law school roommate. And he's a 6'5" African-American. I used to kid him. I used to say, men cross the street to get away from him, and women cross the street to get in front of him. He's a big, really good-looking man. And I was his roommate for 3 years, and he's one of my best, still to this day, he's one of my best friends. And I used to tell him in law school, I used to say, Chaz, I'm going to make you larger than life someday. And he would laugh because none of us expected that this was going to happen. But when I got the chance to write The Jurymaster, I wanted to put him in there, and he's the real McCoy. So, I think in this day and age in particular, we have to be careful about, what we're writing about and whether we have true knowledge about it and all that kind of thing. And I think the big thing is respect, is to just be respectful. And I don't try to write from the perspective of an African-American man. I try to write from the perspective of a family man who is going into a very dangerous situation, and he knows what's at stake. He knows what's at risk, and he's got to pull this off. So, and I do the same thing with my Tracy Crosswhite series. I don't try to write from the perspective of a woman. I try to write from the perspective of a Seattle homicide detective doing her best to do her job. And I don't try to get into the intimate details too much.
Last night I caught your event with Poison Pen Press with Barbara Peters, and I know that you always do events with her for forever and ever at this point. And I love that she said that The Last Agent reminded her a lot of Jean Le Carré, and I agree with the same kind of a thing, because I think it's been a while since I've seen a real spy novel like this. Yes, last year there was a novel from Nelson DeMille where there were two investigators going in. I'm trying to remember, I'm spacing the last name of it right now, or the name of it right now. But it still was not was the deserter, and they were going in to find somebody that was had eluded them along the way. It was similar to this, but this one was really inside Russia, and I think it's also because we don't know that much about Russia, but it's someplace that still intrigues us, like what is happening there, and the way the world shifts there. The world kind of shape shifts as time goes on when you're there. You think you're on solid ground, but you're not, and then you move like this. And I think that who's in, who's out, who could be murdered like on a whim, on a like a couple of weeks ago when we heard that man was poisoned, and it's like, what ends. It's just a totally different way of thinking than what we've heard before. And I think that when you brought us inside Russia on this, we were thinking about, once again, this country that we hear about, but it's so complex and so completely different from just about any place else.
Yeah, it really goes back to the Tsarist days. I've done a lot of research on Russia. I was fortunate enough to spend a month there, just after kind of perestroika hit. And so things were still evolving and changing, and it was before Putin came into power. But it really goes back to Tsarist times. I've done a lot of research for the third book in the series. It'll be a trilogy. And Russia was really, in many respects, a mafia state. And I don't say that derogatorily. It was sort of a reality. The Tsar would throw these guys in prisons, and they would band together, and they formed what was called the Vor, which is basically the Russian mafia. And then when Stalin came into power, they opened the gulags. Well, the gulags became a feeding ground for the Vor. And the Vor's whole identity was they would not cooperate at all with the government. That was part of the creed. We will not cooperate with the government at all. We will exist on our own. And so this idea of also communism, where you don't own anything, okay? So consequently, if you steal something, You're not stealing it from anybody because nobody owns anything. So there was this whole mentality that goes way, way, way back of people just trying to exist, trying to survive, like trying to live. And you know, it's been a hard scrabble existence for so many years. And I think the thing that's disappointing is we sort of saw the light at the end of the tunnel, except Gorbachev didn't really realize what he was unleashing and how he was unleashing it. And the way that it came about is he allowed the oligarchs to basically take over the country. And in order to get the country back from the oligarchs, Putin had to go in and be even more unscrutable to get the country back. And so the country has never really truly belonged to the people. And that's kind of the sad thing, because I can tell you from my experience over there, the people are lovely, lovely people. But it's a country that is ripe with paranoia and worry and concern, and it's really sad, because I think it's a country that you know, you'd like to see the veil lifted and people be able to just sort of live and exist.
So when you actually you hear the fear in people's voices, you hear the fear when you're talking to them. Like, well, even in the happiest moments, do you still feel that there's pall over everything of what could happen?
Yeah. Even when we were over there during Perestroika, there was sort of well, a couple of things would happen. You know, obviously you can't speak the language and you can't read because it's in Cyrillic. And so you would try to stop somebody and smile at them, and their immediate reaction was, "What do you want? What do you want with me?" And then the other thing was, they were starting new businesses, and you would go into the businesses, and you know, they would always look for a way to get you for a little bit more. Like, I remember we went to dinner one night, and there was, I think, 8 of us. And it was like 900,000 rubles, which I forget how much that was. And I was trying to add it up and look, see if this was right or wrong. And, you know, my dad was like, "Bob, forget about it. You know, let's just," anyway, but when I finally got home, I realized that they had taken us for about 100,000 rubles, wow. Which I think at the time, it was like $80. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but there was that mentality, you know, of get what you can and get as much as you can, no matter how little it was. And that, you know, that was disappointing. But I will say this, I've been fortunate in later years in life to go to Africa and China and some other really fabulous, interesting places. And even Africa, as remarkable as Africa was, it didn't match up to Russia. Russia was really an intriguing place from the moment we landed until the moment we got back on the plane. You were never certain that you were okay. Everything was just a little bit off. You know, one quick example, we landed and there was snow on the ground along Red Square. We got up the next morning and all the snow was gone. And we said, "What happened to the snow?" Well, they brought in trucks and they brought in people because they needed jobs, and they had them shovel the snow at Red Square.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, there was even some references in the book to the size that Moscow is, because I think there were 3 different airports they could have left from, and that eluded me. Like, I did not know that. I was thinking of, you know, like a city like New York, or I was thinking something like that. And then even like the trains, I remember one time the train was going to leave on time. It has to leave on time because Putin says the trains leave on time, and this is what happens. So they knew that there was no moment that everything was not going to happen exactly according to this. So they only had a certain seconds to get away. And I thought that kind of history of the flavor of this is really what goes on in the country, whether it was which of the 3 airports they were going to leave from. I felt like I was more educated about what the place was like, at least from a terrain point of view, and got into some of the politics and the fear. The fear definitely comes through, that no one was sure who they were talking to and was it going to be okay. And that's a very disarming way to go through. Not only are you trying to get this person out, but you really don't know who to trust. You don't know who's going to flip you.
And the other thing that's interesting is they have put in directional microphones and face recognition cameras all over the place. Yeah. And they told the people that they were doing this because they had so many people out there that were defaulting on loans, and they wanted to be able to catch them all because they were losing millions of dollars with people defaulting on loans. And the people, you know, bought it. And in reality, it's just Big Brother watching you again. Back in the day of Stalin, it was neighbors talking or speaking about other neighbors. And so nobody wanted anybody to know your business because your neighbor could be the one that turned you in for something that you didn't even do. And now it's technology. They have technology all over the place, apparently, since my time there. And they have technology everywhere. It's very, very hard to not be noticed. And that was one of the reasons for the sort of the Thomas Crown affair, is because, they weren't going to be able to just walk away.
Mm-mm. No, and it was that constant changing and what's going to happen and layer this on. I won't give it away for people because it's so terrific. The dialogue's also very fast paced as well as the action. And when you're writing, is the draft that brisk or do you tighten it later on? Or are you writing that like staccato kind of let's get in and out of it?
No, I'm writing in the staccato. I write with my fingers. I mean, I'm a journalist, and so I write straight onto the keyboard. I learned a long time ago that action is dialogue and dialogue is action.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the types of books that I write, it's important for my readers to feel like, the pace is moving. Now, there are times when the pace is going to slow down, and you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, when you're in a hurry, you're not going to have the chance to eloquently say a paragraph. You're just talking when we gotta go.
Yeah. And even the characters, do you flesh them out in advance? Do you sketch, or are you just writing from what you're feeling about these people? Like at any moment, does the person's hair color change or such and such, and go, wait a second, back on that page?
So I'm an organic writer, but I do a tremendous amount of research before I start writing. So I have a pretty good sense of the characters before I start to write them, but I always allow them to surprise me. Mm-hmm. Viktor Fedorov surprised me a lot in this book. He really did. There's a scene in the book where they're playing chess. And the entire time I was writing that scene, and even talked to a friend of mine that's a chess player, the entire time I was writing that scene, I thought for sure I was going to cut it. But about 100 pages later, Viktor Fedorov made it clear to me why that scene was important. And so I kept it. And so, that's one of the real pleasures of the writing experience is when your characters begin to surprise you. As a writer, you're surprised by some of the things they do. I learned a long time ago, I read a book by Stephen King, and he said, never cut anything, because your subconscious is telling you the things that need to be in your novel, even if you don't know that that's what needs to be in your novel. So that first draft, Carol, I don't cut anything. I keep everything. And I make a promise to myself that no one reads the first draft but me. So I can put anything I want in there and not be worried that something's going to show or whatever, something's going to be bad. It's for me. And I would say that the first draft is in many respects, it's my Jeffrey Deaver outline. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard the story that Jeffrey Deaver writes like 100-page outline or something like that, 200-page outline. So that first draft, I think, is basically my outline to let me understand that the plot's going to work.
Yeah, I'm going to be able to pull, I'm getting them out of Russia at some point. It is going to really come together. Over the chess game, I was thinking about that. Jenkins learns a lot about the man that he needs to be his co-conspirator. And I feel like chess is this head game, and you can learn a lot about the person just by watching them play, whether they're careful or cautious or risk taker or whatever. Do you play chess? I don't play. Do you play?
Well, very poorly, which is why I talked to a friend of mine that he plays all over, and he plays often. When we go to Thriller Fest, he goes to the parks, and those guys are playing speed chess, and he'll play speed chess and things like that. But you're right. I mean, chess is one of those games that it really can reveal a lot about a human being. Mm-hmm. About the way that they think and exist. And, Fedorov thinks that he's taking Jenkins, but in reality, Jenkins is learning what he needs to know about Fedorov in order for what he's going to do later on in the book.
Yeah. And the sleight of hand is something that happens so much in this book, of these moments. Were those all in there at the beginning, or did you kind of pump them up as time went on? Because it's just so well done, of the switches that people have to make and what they're going to do.
So here's a really interesting thing, and this is what I love about the writing process, right? So when I first started, there was some sleight of hand in there, but I was a little leery about it because I didn't want people to think, it was kind of a gimmick or goofy. But then in my research, what I learned is that the CIA would bring in magicians to teach CIA officers things like sleight of hand, misdirection. A lot of times what they were doing was called a pass by. So you have someone that's giving you information coming in one direction, you're going the other direction, and in this pass by, you're going to put something in their hand or drop something in their bag. Well, you want to have another motion that if you were being watched, they would look at and they'd never see you drop it in their bag. So they were doing a lot of this stuff at what was called the farm, which was where CIA officers used to go for training. And once I learned that this was a real thing, I felt much more comfortable in putting in a couple of more things of this misdirection. The disguises is another thing that they teach. Just simple changes in appearance can cause people to completely lose track of you. And CIA officers learned how to do that and do it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
To walk down a hallway as a man, and by the time you get 45 steps, you're a woman. Pretty incredible.
Subtle changes. This is what I'm going to do. Pull out the scarf, go do this, and you're on your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole different world. It's a whole different, you try to figure out how people like that go home and make dinner. Seriously.
I often wonder, where do they get the courage?
Yeah.
I would be petrified my whole life. I'd be petrified my whole life. But there are people out there that are just sort of built that way, and they're made that way. I'm not. But there are people that are built that way. And I knew some lawyers that I would venture to guess would be great, intelligence officers because of the way that they tried cases. They were fearless, just absolutely fearless when they tried a case. They were not afraid of losing.
No, it's like, I don't hold back. I would just sit there and say exactly what was on my mind. And there are people that it's a very measured response. It's what are going to be the implications of it, blah, blah, blah. Remember one time I had to go do a deposition someplace, and it was something that I really didn't believe in. And like the fact that they had me there for all these hours was driving me crazy. And I just blurted something out at one point, and they said, these people are going to see this. And I was like, then can I get out of here? Because I'm telling you exactly what happened in 2 sentences. And I've been here for 3 hours. And I'm telling you, there is no case. I'm telling you, there is no problem. And it was just really funny because everybody in the room was just so appalled. And I was like, we're not writing a book here. I'm just telling you, it didn't happen the way you think. And I really don't have any time. And I remember it was the day of the blackout in New York. And I got back to the office and the power was out. And I remember I had done a big television thing that morning and I had these really high heels on and I'd already walked back from this place and I got home, there was no power. And I was like, back to the office and I was like, you are kidding me. And now I've got to walk down the steps in these heels. And the people at the deposition, I was like, I could have gone home. I was all the way over there. It was just, but it's one of those things where they had this thing they wanted to come to and they were trying to get me 5 different ways. And I was finally like, just stop. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Unfortunately, a lot of the law is not about uncovering the truth. It's about uncovering the facts that you can spin to be the truth. Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, but
it's the way it goes. It absolutely the way it goes. There was a line about the 2 characters where one talks about setting a hook and reeling the other in. And I feel like you do the same thing with your readers. You set the hook and then you reel us in from that very first page. And it's also working on keeping us on the hook. And I know you fish, so I've got this. I feel like this is my metaphor here. And you're holding us that whole way and you're not going to take us off the hook. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're just going to be like, completely towed along on what's going on and you're not going to be able to get off. And I think that that's a real art for an author to be able to do, because there's so many times where it's like, oh, we're in this part of the book where it's just so slow. It's not happening. And you don't do that. And I think that that's one of the things I love the most. It's the reason I've read, there's a whole stack of more books over there that I've read. And what keeps me coming back, and I know so many people say that when they see you have a book out, they don't care what it's about, they're going to read it because they just know they're going to get a good storyteller happening at the same time.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the nicest compliments that Barb gave me last night. Mm-hmm. When she said, Bob can write anything because he's a storyteller. Mm-hmm. And that's what he does first. And, it was drawing a blank all of a sudden, but the gentleman from Detroit, he said, I write all the parts. I don't write the parts that people won't read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of times in the editing process, it's getting rid of the duplicity, having someone say exactly what they just did in the prior chapter, which they saw. It's
Mm-hmm.
changing it to, she told them what they did, so it's one sentence instead of 4 paragraphs. And I think you learn that as an author to go along, but I also think it's a feel thing. And especially in this kind of a book, this is a book that needs to move. It needs to move because it's the movement that gives people the greatest anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell people it's no different than when you travel. Think about when you travel and you got to get to the train station, you got to be there on time, you got to get on the train, you got to make sure, and where you're going to put all those little things that come into play as you're rushing to get things done. That's why travel is so difficult. Well, imagine traveling with people chasing you.
Right.
And so that's what I try to do is I try not to write the things that people can figure out on their own. I think that's the other thing that's important. I think this is a bond that an author makes with a reader, which is you say to yourself, my readers are intelligent. They will understand things that I don't have to put in writing. They will figure it out. And so I always tell my students, I always say to them when I'm teaching, I always say to them, don't write what the reader can presume. Leave white space for your reader to fill in the blanks. Not every character has to come on stage and be told, the reader doesn't have to be told what they're wearing, if what they're wearing is not important. Just let the reader fill in the blanks. And I think that's the beauty of books, is when they're done correctly, the reader can fill in the scene, the scenery, the clothing, the hair. And that's why I get emails all the time where people will say, who do you see playing the part of Charles Jenkins? Who do you see playing the part of, Matt LaFleur? And I'll tell them, I see Matt Damon playing Matt LaFleur, and Charles Jenkins, the guy who they're talking about being the next James Bond, the African-American actor. I'd love to see that guy be the next Charles Jenkins, because that's who I see. But they'll often say, oh, really? I think it was somebody else. Well, that's the white space.
Right.
And I think that's what authors, good authors strive for, is to let the reader build their own movie.
Yeah. When you were in Russia, were you taking notes on what was going on, or were you absorbing the feeling of what was going on? Because I get the feeling that my take was that you were observing, and you're observing what you're going to write later on, because it's not a note, it's a feeling that comes across. Am I right?
Yeah, no, very much so. Very much so. We also, my brother-in-law and I did something that was pretty stupid, which turned out to be pretty amazing. And that is, before we went, we decided we were going to get flat top haircuts.
Okay.
So we got flat tops and blue berets. And my brother-in-law wears military boots anyway, and pants with a lot of pockets on it. Well, I landed in Moscow, and I handed the guy my passport. And this guy in a green uniform took one look at it, looked at me and said, "Niet," and pointed me to a room. So in the Eighth District, that's a true thing. That really happened to me.
Wow.
I'm in a room with my bags, and these guys are going through my bags left and right. And what's really funny, Carol, is we had a huge duffel bag because we had an 18-month-old baby. And we were under the impression, this is back in 1997. So we were under the impression that the food over there was terrible. And, how was our baby going to eat? So my wife had brought all these they opened up this bag. I don't know what they expected to find, but they found all this, little power bars and tiny, scoopings of, just food for the baby and for us. Their top ramen. I remember the guy looking at it, and he looks at me like, "What are you, nuts? What's wrong with you?" But throughout that trip, especially in Moscow, we were followed. They had someone follow us, and they didn't try to hide the person following us. She wore white boots, so she was very identifiable. And she followed us all through the first day and all through most of the second day. I had young kids come up to me. They'd be in Red Square, and we were down looking at the Church of the Nativity, I think it's called. And they were all looking at us, and finally this one little boy got very brave, and he walked up and he said, "You military, you military." I said, no, I'm not military. He said, yes, you military, you American military, and so it was stupid, but because it was stupid, I got some really great stories out of it.
Yeah, yeah, because people were like, let's go through the bag. This is what's going to happen, Do you have because so much of it is people have to get from here to here. Do you have maps up every place of like charting because you're going over like, okay, this river is going to be this wide, this is going to be this. Do you have all those reference points, or are you
Yeah,
your pants?
so I'll have reference points, and then I use Google Maps to remind myself of things. But the other thing that's really truly amazing is I never stayed in the Metropole Hotel. I visited the Metropole Hotel, and I remember being in the lobby, and it was opulent and really beautiful and all this stuff. But I'd never been up into one of the rooms. Well, I'm on YouTube, and some guy, don't ask me why, he's got his camera. And he said, okay, I'm getting on the elevator, and now I'm on the elevator, and he goes up to 8th floor, and I'm off the elevator, I'm walking down the hallway, and I'm going down, and here's my room. He opens his room up, he walks in, and here's my view up. I don't know why it was on there, but it was perfect. It's exactly what I needed.
Exactly what you needed to see, exactly what you needed to do.
Whatever is out there, I try to use and try to, there are people who do walking tours in Moscow, for instance, and sometimes you can find them on YouTube. You'll find a walking tour, and I just sort of follow them, and I look, and then I remember, because I was at Lubyanka and Lubyanka Square and the big toy store that's on adjacent from it, and it's just a matter of sort of remembering, was it a 4-lane highway, a 6-lane highway? And I just try to understand. The third book I'm writing is going to be a little more difficult. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get them out. I want to make things different. I don't want to write the same book. So I'm doing a lot of reading. People write books about traveling in Moscow. And so I read it. I read about them, the trains they took and where they went and what they saw in the cities they went to. And then because I'm a lawyer, right, I keep these notes, and I have 2 binders already for the third book that are like this thick. And they're notes of people's travels in Russia, all throughout Russia. And then I'll decide, how do I want to get them to go? I really, really wanted them to get out through Egypt, because I was going to Egypt in October. But that's
now you're going to the kitchen.
November, but that's not happening.
Now we go to the kitchen. Like we were going to go to Europe. Now we go to the living room. Yeah. Now we go watch something on TV. We're not going anywhere,
No, it's too bad, but
yeah.
Again, I can't complain too much. My life has been very good.
I feel the same way. So this is the 3rd series that you've written. I think the 3rd, right? What do you like about writing series? What's the turn on of that? Like, do you realize that when you're writing it, that there's more to tell about this character? Like, did you go into writing the Ace Sisters thinking it was going to be a solo book?
I did. So this is actually pretty interesting. So I did. I kind of thought it would be, a solo book. And I was having a conversation with my editor, Gracie Doyle. And she said, have you thought about maybe writing another book in the series, because the book's doing really well. And this is before publication, but the reviews were coming in. And I said, yeah, give me a second. And I went and I looked, and on like chapter 48, the very last sentence, I called her up and I said, if we take out the last sentence on chapter 48, it'll be ambiguous as to what happened. And if we can do that, I can write you the next book immediately.
Wow.
And Gracie said, let me look into it. She said, we can do it. And so we took out one sentence, and that taking out that one sentence allowed me to write The Last Agent.
Was that close to being on press? Like when you made that decision?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is really one of the thrilling things about, being able to work on a computer, but also what Amazon Publishing is able to do. They're able to very quickly, when I wrote Sam Hell, I had to call up Danielle Marshall at Lake Union and say, literally on the cusp of I said, we have to change a name. We really, really have to change a name. And I told her why. And she's like, all right, we'll do it. We can get it done. So they're really great about, those last minute things. I'm sure they don't appreciate them, but they're really great about executing them.
Yeah, I know both of them. I know both of them. Consummate professionals. I mean, Danelle, all the people that you work with are just really consummate professionals of, let's just figure out how to make it happen. Let's figure out, it's a very can-do kind of a spirit. And it's a very, how we want the author to work. We want this to be a success. And I feel like that whenever they're working on something, that's what it is about. It's about this go, go, go kind of philosophy. And I do like that. I really do.
They told me when I first met with them, and I was talking to them about social media and all that stuff, they said, we think the best thing that an author can do is write the next great book. You let us take care of the social media, the marketing. You just do what you do best. And that's something I really have learned working with them, is do what I do best. And what I do best is I write novels. I wanted to write screenplay for this when we sold it. And I said, no, because people go to school for years to be good screenwriters, and I'm not egotistical enough to think I'm going to turn around without any training and write a great screenplay. And I don't even want to try, because if I do that, it's going to take time away from me writing the next novel, which is what I love to do. I let people do their jobs.
Will you read the screenplay at any point? Will you see it before it's filmed, or you're hands off?
I don't know exactly. I'm going to be an executive producer. But what that is going to entail, I don't know. I'll be on call if they have questions, if they have, things that they're trying to figure out. But I don't know. There's nothing contractually that allows me to go in and say, no, this has to be changed, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. But I hopefully I'll get a chance to read it ahead of time, and they'll ask for my input. And if they do, I'll give them
what I think it was David Baldacci that said once, just make sure the check is really good, and you put it up on the wall and you blow it up. And they say, can you make the man a woman? And you look at the check and go, okay. Yeah. Can we make the hair brown instead of okay? And as long as the check is good enough, you're like, okay with the whole thing. It was very, very funny line from him. And they've been comfortable enough.
Yeah, they've been really extremely professional with me. The only thing that we had a discussion with, and the woman at the studio, she's really, really brilliant. She's really smart. And she's already telling me how she would frame the Eighth Sister, in terms of the TV series and things like that. But the only thing we talked about was opening up the possibilities of African American actors. And by because Jenkins is 62 or so, and so could we make him younger? And instead of him being a Vietnam War vet, he could be an Iraqi war vet, things like that. And I'm fine with that. If it allows a greater pool of potential actors to take the part, that would be great.
If they don't have to worry about the health risks of them running for the train and having a heart attack, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. We're not going to be able to do that. The time that you were spent as a lawyer, how did it influence your writing? Did it influence the discipline of sitting down and writing?
Yeah, very much. Two things. One is writing quickly, because there are some times where you don't have the luxury of time. It's 5 o'clock and you get out of trial, and the last thing the judge says to you is, I want you to brief these 3 issues for me for tomorrow morning. And so you're dead tired, and you got to go back to your office, and you got to do research. And this is back in the day before we had all this stuff on computers. I had to go to books in libraries and look them up, and then then type it up, and you got to have it ready by the next morning. So speed is one thing. Accuracy is another. Being accurate in your facts, as accurate as you can be. And then the other thing is work ethic. And I learned work ethic, I think, what it really meant when I was practicing law, but I saw it in practice from my mom and my dad. You don't raise 10 kids and put 10 kids through college and through professional school by sitting around. And my dad and my mom both, they worked their tails off to give us a chance in life. And I take that very seriously. I think that's something that I, anyway, as a child, that I recognized, and now as an adult, I take it seriously. That they sacrificed a tremendous amount so that I could have success, and I don't want to waste that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you miss being a lawyer at all?
No.
Do you miss it?
No.
For a minute?
No, and I'll be honest. I was a decent lawyer, but I wasn't a great lawyer, and I think one of the reasons I wasn't a great lawyer is because I did care too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the people I knew who were really great trial lawyers, they were fearless. I mean, they were just absolutely fearless. And I was never that guy. I wouldn't hire me to defend me if I was up for murder. I would hire one of those other guys to defend me.
I interviewed Scott Turow a couple of months ago, and he said something about, you don't really want to know if the guy's guilty. You just know you've got to do what you can to get him off. And I feel like you're so ethical that if you knew he was guilty, it's like, I don't want to deal with this. You really should go to jail. Like, I don't think I can do this. Just knowing you as long as I do. So you usually do 2 to 3 books a year. How do you, which is incredible. How do you do, like, are you always writing one, or are your hands in more than one? Like, do you finish this and then start, or what do you do?
So my hands are in more than one, but not necessarily writing simultaneously. I'm editing. So for instance, I turned in her tracks, which will be at Tracy Crosswhite 8, which will be out next April. And I was sort of doing the copy edits on that while I was writing the literary novel that'll be out next September, which is called right now, it's called The World Played Chess. And I'm getting the developmental edits and the copy edits on this. So I'm always doing something. I was supposed to get back my second draft of the developmental edit. Well, I wasn't going to get to them because, I'm fortunate to be able to do all these interviews about The Last Agent. So there's always something going on. And that's another thing I think I've learned practicing law is being able to multitask. Being in the middle of something and then getting pulled off it and having to immediately jump on something else. I think I'm pretty good at that, but unfortunately, sometimes that can lead to distractions like the internet, getting pulled onto doing research that you don't really need to do, but you're having fun doing it, so you keep doing it. But I think multitasking is important in this business. Because as you know, I was finished with the copy edits of that book probably 5 months ago. And one of the reasons why one of the reasons I like to get out more than one book a year is simply because I love what I do. I mean, I love to tell stories. But I also feel that it's a benefit both to me and to my readers because they don't have to wait a year. And I think that, people are if you're not putting out books, they're going to look for somebody that is who they like and enjoy just as much. So it's a bond that I take seriously between reader and writer, and that bond is that I will put out the very best book that I can, and I will never put out something that I'm not proud of, and that you should in any way feel guilty about spending your money on or spending really your time on, because a book, unlike a movie, I mean, you go to a movie, it's an hour and a half, 2-hour commitment. A book can be anywhere from 6 to 8 hour commitment, a 400-page book. And if someone's going to devote their time to reading something that I've written, I want it to be good. I want them to feel that they've made a wise investment.
Well, I keep telling people that I feel like this is a golden age for publishing too, that we really need to seize, because movies are behind, television shows are behind. Nothing. I mean, it's September. Nothing's really on air that's new for the fall season, and we don't know when it's going to air. And I keep telling people in publishing right now, this is a moment for books, because until a couple of weeks ago, there was no sports competition. And it's still not the same. Sports and everything, award shows, the Emmys the other night was not the same. It was pretty entertaining, but it wasn't the same. Yeah. And I think that as a result, books are a constant right now. And it's also something that can be edited without everyone being in the same room. There's not a whole crew that needs to be someplace. There's not a scene that needs to be set up. It's a lot of work. Yes, it still is, because you're not in the same room having the conversations, but I just think we're in this moment, and if we seize it, it's like it may not happen again for a while. I just really feel we might be doing this for a year, but whatever. I feel strongly about that.
Yeah, no, I find myself doing a tremendous amount of reading at nighttime. Old shows are getting picked up again. My wife is watching a lot of prior seasons of old shows that she's then found to be really good. She's watching Suits. And she's making her way through that. But I agree with you. I go and I turn on the TV, and there's nothing new. There's nothing fresh, and it's because they are going through a difficult time right now down there in LA. Nothing is getting made. I've seen my book sales increase since COVID hit, and I really I agree with you. I think people are looking for an escape. I get asked at times, "Are you going to put COVID in your books?" And I can tell you this book and the next two books coming out, there is no mention of COVID.
Mm-mm,
And
mm-mm.
I don't know that I ever will, because I know that people have said to me, you know, we don't want to read about it. We're having to live it. You know, we want to go do other things. I got a wonderful email from an older gentleman the other day, and he said, you know, I'm suffering from cancer, and I've been going through treatments for 3 years, and your books give me the opportunity to take some trips that I know I'm never going to get to take.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's really heartwarming.
Yeah, and people they want to leave the house right now and have an adventure, and they want to sit there and say something, and things have to deliver. And that's, how do you decide what you're writing at a given time? Like you said, next year it's Tracy, then it's another literary thriller. Like, how do you know what you're going to do? Is it in your brain, or is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, a lot of it is sort of contractual, but they obviously give me a lot of leeway, and so I try to get out of Tracy one book every year, so I know sort of what that schedule is like. But when when the schedule gets screwed up is when I get an idea like The World Played Chess, which is the story of an 18-year-old young man in 1979 who graduates high school and is just looking forward to spending his last summer with his buddies, drinking beer, you know, going out and having a great time. And he gets a summer job with his brother-in-law on a construction crew with 2 Vietnam vets. And one of the Vietnam vets starts to go through PTSD. And that was really a real thing that happened. It was something that happened to me. I worked on a crew with 2 Vietnam vets. The one guy was not going through PTSD, but subsequently he did. And this guy learns that he doesn't know anything about the world. You know, these guys were 18 years old and they were getting on buses and being taken to Paris Island and down to San Diego, and the whole world changed for them. You know, they'd go out on patrol and they'd watch a guy get blown up before their eyes, and they'd be told saddle up and move out. So it's really a story of three men, and how this whole progresses, and you know, that takes time. And so, you know, while I could have been working on the third Charles Jenkins book, I really wanted to write this novel for Danielle Marshall, and she loved it. And so I have the copy edits coming in, and meanwhile, I know Gracie's looking at, well, when are you going to get the next one done?
Gracie's going down Danielle. It's a good thing no one's in the office right now, because she can't go down the hall and say, hello, I want my book.
But that's a great problem to have, you know, isn't
Yes.
it? I mean, for people to want your next book, that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just.
You'll take that. You'll take that problem.
As you know, because we've been together a long time, I've been in the other position where, you know, I've had someone say, no, we don't really want any more David Sloan books. And that's, you know, that's heart crushing for an author, because that's basically saying, we're not going to, you know, what you love to do, we're not going to publish. So
yeah. What you love to do, we're not seeing a path forward on. I always love that. That's usually the line. We don't see a path forward on doing this. And you're like, was the title of this book always The Last Agent? Was it always going to be that, or did you play around with the title?
That's a good question, because The Eighth Sister was the title that I came up with. I think The Last Agent was a title that my agents came up with, because Charles Jenkins really is he's really sort of a relic. He's sort of the dinosaur. He's sort of they don't have a lot of boots on the ground agents anymore. And so I think they were trying to play on that, you know, sort of the last bastion of those guys that still go into those countries and do those things. I don't remember what I called it originally, if I even had a name for it. Sometimes I'll write a whole book and I'll call Gracie and I'll say, Gracie, I have no idea what the title of this book is. I need your help. And that's the other thing. They are fabulous at covers. I mean, is that a fabulous cover?
It's a great cover. It's a really terrific cover. I was just going to say the same thing. Did they play around with the cover, or was this always it?
You know, one of the first iterations was that cover, and then they just started playing with the print and the color and
even the
they
spine.
just did a great job.
The spine is great. The whole thing is great. Yeah, that was my next question. I also listened to this book on audio, and it was always good for me because I can go back and forth. And what I really loved is Brilliance Audio that did it. Each different track was the beginning of a chapter, which a lot of times does not happen. So I was going back and forth listening in the car. So last night I needed to finish the book, and I was on my way to book group, and I was finding chapter 45 on the audio because I said, okay, I've got to get to there. And I have a car that's old enough that I actually do use the discs that you put in the car. So it was like, get me disc 9 now.
Yeah.
Eduardo Ballerini is the narrator, and he is fantastic. He did this and he did The Eighth Sister, and he's just absolutely brilliant. Did you select him as the narrator, or how did that come about?
Yeah. So Andrew Gross
Yeah.
was kind enough one time to, I think he sent me the one man, and I was blown away. I was listening to books on tape because I was traveling back and forth to my office when I had my office downtown. And I was blown away by how good this guy was with accents. And then I told Andrew, I said, God, this is such a great book. And he said, well, I think I got another one that's just as good. It's called Button Men. And so I read Button Men, and I listened to Button Men, and I was like, oh my God, this was a great story. But the narrator, again, was fabulous. So I won a Golden Microphone Award for The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hill, which I narrated. So they asked me, they said, do you want to narrate The Eighth Sister? And I thought of all the Russian that's in that book and the Russian words that's in that book. And I said, no, but if you can get the guy that did Andrew Gross's book, I think his name is Antonio Baldini. If you can get him. Well, I had no idea that he's been the male narrator of the year, like 2 years running.
Yeah.
He's a really, really talented guy, just really talented. And they got him. And I was like, I was ecstatic.
What was fun, because the last event, one of the last author events I went to, Andrew was an event for Andrew, and he had him there and he had him read there. And it was really great. And they talked about the audio process and how he did it. So when I saw he was the narrator here, I immediately leapt on it, because he's one of those people that anything he narrates, you want to listen to. He's
he's fabulous.
super good.
Yeah, he really is. He really is. I'm sure he's also a very talented actor. But he's a very talented man.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. And he was actually, they both were taking questions that evening, and it was just really fun. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is really great. This is wonderful. So.
Absolutely.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad we had a conversation in a coffee shop all those years ago. And I'm so glad you did what you did, because it has just brought joy to so many people. And you think about how many books that you got to write over these last, how many years now have you been with Amazon?
Well, I think I started, my first book came out, The Sinai Canary, came out in 2004.
2004, yeah.
So I'm about at 16 years, and I think I'm at about 20 books. And you've been with me from the very beginning. You and Bart with me from the very beginning.
I think I missed that night, but I think I definitely picked up on enjoyment. And I remember in fact, I have the galley of the book over there that I found that on the shelf, that I don't think I throw anything out. I'm like a little hoarder over here, but I found the original galley the other day. And I remember, I think it was Jamie Rabb putting in my hand and saying, this is a really good book. I think you're going to enjoy this one, and bringing it to me at lunch. And that's how long ago it's been. So endlessly fun.
It has been great. It's been a great time. And I want to get back to Thriller Fest and have you sit next to me and knit.
Next to you knitting. You guys used to tease me so much. And then you used to go to the theater. I remember you and Jeff Ayers used to go to the theater all the time. And it's like, okay, where are you going to go see? Where are you going to go? Sometimes you bring your daughter. And it was just like, it's like old home week getting together like that. Yeah. And then I remember I was out there in Seattle one time when we went out to dinner with you and your wife. And it was, I remember where we were sitting, the whole thing. So it's nice when you not only have great memories of the books, we've got some great memories of things you've done and places you've gone along the way as well.
Very much. I
wish you great luck with your tour from your new office in your home.
Thank you.
You'll be zooming away.
I don't even have all the knobs on the drawers yet,
It's so funny, because it's like, okay, there we are. That's the reason his shelves are not completely filled. He just moved into the new office. So there you go, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure as always. Thanks so much. Very special day.
Thanks, Carol.
And to our readers, look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.